They fired the black delivery guy for leaning on the wrong elevator. 3 weeks later, he walked into the boardroom, not with boxes, but with the deed to the company. Marcus hadn't always been a delivery guy. Before the brown uniform and barcode scanners, he was a data analyst, quiet, sharp, and far too ambitious for the role he was hired into. He used to sit behind a cubicle at Halverson and Price, the very company he'd one day own. Back then, he worked the night shift, running back-end reports no one cared to read, except him. He noticed things, like how certain shipments disappeared before they were logged, how budgets didn't align across departments, and how Grant Halverson's signature appeared on documents dated days he was supposedly overseas. Marcus flagged the inconsistencies. He emailed his supervisor. He got no reply. Then he got demoted. When he asked why, HR told him his tone had made senior staff uncomfortable. They didn't fire him. They reassigned him to inventory transport, from spreadsheets to freight carts, from night shifts to loading docks. That was 3 years ago. Most men would have quit, complained, sued. Marcus stayed silent, but not out of weakness. He was watching. He learned who really pulled the strings in the company. He studied board members, memorized shareholder splits, tracked merger rumors. He saved every paycheck, ate canned soup for months, invested in a startup no one believed in. And when it sold, he bought in, quietly, through a chain of holding companies and blind trusts. Until one day, he wasn't just delivering boxes to Halverson and Price. He owned a controlling stake, and no one knew. Grant Halverson wasn't used to being surprised. He was the kind of white executive who measured his self-worth in corner offices, mergers, and how quickly he could make someone feel small. To him, power wasn't earned. It was inherited, then projected. So when the board informed him that a new stakeholder had secured majority interest, he smirked. "Let me guess," he chuckled, swirling scotch in his glass. "Some tech bro with a vision board and a crypto wallet?" His assistant handed him a dossier. "You'll want to see this." Grant scanned the papers, frowning. The name was there. Marcus Elijah Moore. No title. No prior board affiliations. Just a network of shell companies tied together by a single Delaware holding group. And an avalanche of quiet acquisitions over 18 months. "Who the hell is this guy?" Grant muttered. That question echoed louder the next day when Marcus walked into the boardroom. No suit, no entourage, just a quiet stare and a black folder in his hand. Grant stood slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What is this? A prank?" Marcus didn't answer right away. He simply handed the folder to the general counsel, then turned to the room. "I'm not here to humiliate anyone," he said calmly. "I'm here to claim what I've already paid for." Grant scoffed. "You're the delivery guy." "Was," Marcus said. "Now I'm the majority owner." Silence slammed the room like a door. Only one board member, a woman named Helen, leaned forward, intrigued. "You planned this," she said, almost impressed. Marcus gave a slight nod. "Some things you don't rush." Grant's face turned red. And for the first time in his long, ruthless career, he had no idea what to say. That night, Grant sat alone in his office, replaying the moment on loop. The delivery guy, Marcus, standing there with perfect composure, like he belonged, like he owned the air. Grant couldn't sleep. He called favors, searched databases, hired a private investigator, and what he found only made it worse. Marcus had grown up in the foster system. No Ivy League pedigree, no family money, just public schools, part-time jobs, and a mountain of student debt he somehow erased within 5 years. He'd worked janitorial shifts in college, did data entry after graduation, got passed over for promotions, got demoted when he spoke up, and yet he'd built an empire underneath them, quietly, relentlessly. It made Grant feel small, and Grant hated feeling small. The next day, Marcus showed up early. No driver, no fanfare, just a thermos of coffee and a black notebook. Employees stared as he walked the halls. Some whispered, some smiled. The receptionist who used to ignore him now stood as he passed. In the boardroom, Marcus opened his notebook and began outlining priorities. Facility audits, internal ethics review, and I want a full report on employee turnover in the last 5 years. Grant burst in late without knocking. "We need to talk," he growled. Marcus didn't look up. "Then sit." "I don't take orders from—" Marcus glanced at him. Just once. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it carried 3 years of humiliation and 3 decades of silence. Grant sat down. The board watched, and the balance of power tilted. Forever. In the weeks that followed, Marcus didn't make sweeping declarations. He listened. To assistants who hadn't gotten raises in years, to custodians who'd cleaned up after executives too proud to look them in the eye, to interns who had ideas, but no one to hear them. He walked the halls at odd hours, took meetings others skipped, and rewrote entire workflows, not to punish, but to reveal. Meanwhile, Grant was unraveling. He called an emergency shareholders meeting, only to be reminded he was no longer the largest voice in the room. He attempted to undermine Marcus in subtle ways, offhand comments, leaked memos, whispers of inexperience. But the staff noticed. They noticed who stayed late, who remembered names, who asked questions not to corner, but to understand. One afternoon, Marcus hosted an open Q&A in the company cafeteria. No script, no cameras, just questions. "Why didn't you tell anyone who you were?" one junior developer asked. Marcus took a sip of coffee. "Because I wanted to see who'd talk to me when they thought I was no one." A quiet hum filled the room, and from the back someone started clapping, then another, and then the room filled with applause, not explosive, not theatrical, just steady, sincere recognition. For the first time, Marcus smiled. Not because they saw him now, but because he had never stopped seeing them. Grant couldn't stand it. The quiet respect Marcus was earning. The way employees looked at him, not with fear, but something more dangerous, hope. Grant had spent a lifetime mastering power by distance. Titles, glass walls, corner offices. His authority came from being untouchable. But Marcus? Marcus walked through the bullpen like he still belonged there. He nodded at mailroom clerks, remembered birthdays, took stairs instead of elevators, and that made Grant furious. So he did what insecure men in power often do. He schemed. He reached out to former vendors, hinted at pulling contracts unless they found something, anything, on Marcus. He called a journalist friend and pitched a story, how a nobody hijacked a Fortune 500. He even met with lawyers, hoping to challenge Marcus's ownership structure on a technicality. But every road led to a dead end. Marcus had been too careful, too precise. Grant was running out of plays. One evening, he barged into the boardroom after hours, slamming a file on the table where Marcus sat reviewing reports. "You think this is over?" he hissed. "You may own the shares, but you'll never run this place like I did." Marcus looked up slowly. "You mean with fear?" he asked. "With silence, with revolving doors on every floor?" Grant's jaw clenched. "You built an empire," Marcus said, rising. "On intimidation. I'm building something else." Grant scoffed. "What, respect?" "No," Marcus said. "Memory. So they never forget what it cost to be invisible." Grant didn't reply, because deep down, he understood exactly what that meant. The press eventually caught on. It started with a blurry photo, Marcus leaving the Halverson building in jeans, no security detail, holding a coffee like any other employee. Then came the headline: "Former delivery man now owns Halverson and Price." It went viral in under 24 hours. Talk shows debated it. Social media exploded with hashtags. And Grant was livid. "He's turning this company into a feel-good charity stunt," he spat during a board meeting. "We're not a movie script." Marcus didn't flinch. "No, we're not. We're a company that forgot its people. I'm just reminding it." He then rolled out a new initiative, one Grant never saw coming: the 100 Voices Project. A company-wide listening program where employees, at every level, could anonymously submit one story about injustice, disrespect, or being overlooked. Within a week, the inbox overflowed. Accounts of being talked over, passed over, and erased. Some stories were small. Some were gut-wrenching. Marcus read every single one. He didn't reply. He didn't post performative quotes. He just began making changes, quietly but radically. When one executive found his parking spot reassigned to a single mom who'd worked night shifts for 12 years, he complained to Grant. Grant marched into Marcus's office. "This is chaos." Marcus looked up. "No, this is correction." And for the first time, Grant had no comeback. The board began to shift, not in loud declarations, but in glances, pauses, and reluctant nods. Even Helen, the most veteran member, started siding with Marcus more often. Grant noticed. He stormed into Helen's office one afternoon. "You're letting him rewrite everything we built." Helen didn't even look up. "We didn't build anything, Grant. We inherited a system. He's the first one to actually earn it." Grant sneered. "He's a janitor with a grudge." Helen looked him dead in the eye. "No, he's a mirror, and you don't like what you see." Meanwhile, Marcus kept going. He created mentorship programs, instituted pay audits, reinstated workers who had been wrongfully terminated, including a quiet man from the loading docks who once helped Marcus hide from a rainstorm behind a stack of pallets. And still he didn't seek credit. He didn't give speeches or cut ribbons. He just worked. Every Friday, he walked through the lobby, past the same receptionist who used to ignore him. Now, she stood to greet him. "Good morning, Mr. Moore." He always smiled. "Just Marcus." One morning, she stopped him. "Can I ask why you're still so kind?" He paused. "Because I remember how it felt when no one was." Then he kept walking, not for applause, but because he wasn't done yet. Weeks later, Grant stood in the executive washroom staring at his reflection. His corner office still had his name on the door, but the silence around it had grown deafening. No more impromptu meetings, no whispered affirmations, no backslaps in the hallway. He was still technically on the board, still had wealth, power, and pedigree. But something deeper had shifted, and he felt it. He'd built his empire with iron fists and closed doors. Marcus had rebuilt it with open ones. One morning, Grant received an envelope. No sender. Just his name, handwritten in neat cursive. Inside was a photo. It was from years ago, taken by a staff member during a corporate gala. In the background, almost invisible, stood Marcus, carrying a tray, eyes tired, back straight. On the back of the photo were 5 words. "You taught me what not to be." No signature. Grant stared at it for a long time. He could have ripped it, burned it, but instead, he placed it in his desk drawer. Later that afternoon, he stepped into the elevator. A young black intern stood beside him, nervous, gripping a folder. Grant looked at him, then said something he hadn't in years. "Need help?" The intern looked stunned. "No, sir, but thank you." When the doors opened, Grant let him step out first. It wasn't redemption, but it was something. And sometimes, something is where change begins. The company holiday gala arrived. Marcus almost didn't go. He wasn't one for champagne speeches or clinking glasses. But this year, something felt different. He wore a navy suit. No tie, just a quiet confidence. And when he stepped into the ballroom, a hush fell over the room. Not out of fear, out of respect. People remembered who he was. But more importantly, they remembered who they had been when he was invisible. A junior staffer approached him near the hors d'oeuvres table. "Mr. Moore." "Marcus," he corrected gently. "I just wanted to say, I was here the day Mr. Halverson fired you. I didn't say anything. I'm sorry." Marcus looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "It takes courage to say that now. Thank you." The staffer looked relieved. Across the room, Marcus spotted Grant. Standing alone, drink in hand, near a window, their eyes met. Marcus crossed the room. For a second, everyone held their breath. Grant extended his hand. "I underestimated you," he said. Marcus shook it. "You weren't supposed to see me," he replied. "That was the point of people like me. We were never meant to be seen." Grant didn't argue, and for once, he didn't deflect either. That night, no press release went out. But the next morning, the company website quietly updated its mission statement. Power isn't who speaks loudest. It's who listens when no one else does. Not long after the gala, Marcus received an email from a name he hadn't seen in years. Tasha. She had been a supervisor in his early days, one of the few who had defended him, until she got laid off in a cost-cutting sweep Grant had orchestrated. The message was short. "I saw the news. I always knew you'd rise. Just didn't think it would be here. Thank you for remembering us." Marcus stared at the screen, unmoving. Then he replied, "I never forgot." That week, he invited a dozen former employees, people wrongfully dismissed, pushed out, or quietly erased, to a private dinner. No press, no agenda, just stories. Laughter, tears. One of them, a man named Luis, looked across the table and said, You know, this is the first time anyone in this company ever asked me how I felt about being let go. Marcus raised his glass. Then it's the first time the company became human. The room fell quiet. Not somber, just full of something rarely found in boardrooms. Healing. That night, as he walked home alone through the city lights, Marcus passed by the same alley where he used to take his breaks as a delivery man. He paused. Leaning against the wall, he looked up at the towering building he now owned, and whispered, "I'm still here." Not to prove anything, just to remember. The fiscal year ended with record profits. Investors credited bold restructuring. Analysts cited empathy-led leadership. But inside the company, people just called it the Marcus effect. Still, he stayed low profile. He declined interviews, turned down magazine covers. When Forbes reached out to name him among the most powerful black businessmen, he politely refused. "I'm not powerful," he told his assistant. "I'm just visible now." But visibility came with weight. Emails poured in, some full of gratitude, others venomous. Former colleagues resurfaced, pretending they'd always supported him. Even Grant tried once to invite him to speak at a leadership retreat. Marcus declined. He didn't want revenge. He didn't want applause. He wanted integrity. One Friday, a young black intern named Devon knocked on Marcus's door. "I just needed to say thank you," he said, nervous. "You make me feel like maybe I don't have to change who I am to succeed." Marcus stood, walked over, and looked him in the eye. "You don't." Then he handed Devon a small, worn notebook. It was the same one Marcus had carried for years, filled with observations, questions, and names of people who once made him feel invisible. On the first page, he had written, "Remember where you started, then make sure no one else has to start there." Devon clutched it like scripture. And Marcus, he finally allowed himself to exhale. In the months that followed, Marcus's leadership reshaped more than just policies. It changed tone. Meetings grew shorter, but sharper. Turnover plummeted, and for the first time in the company's history, an employee from facilities was promoted to department head. Marcus didn't announce it. He just showed up to her first team meeting with coffee and a handwritten note. "You were always leading. Now the title agrees." But not everyone applauded. An anonymous op-ed in a business journal questioned whether Marcus's identity-focused agenda was sustainable. Another former executive called him a symbol, not a strategist. Marcus read both. Twice. Then got back to work. He didn't need to be liked. He needed to be honest, with himself, with the people, with the work. One morning, he walked past the old freight elevator. The one where he used to nap between shifts. The one Grant once told him wasn't for people like you. Marcus pressed the button, waited. The doors opened. Empty. He stepped in. Rode it all the way to the top floor. When the doors opened again, he didn't step out right away. He just stood there, remembering, not the insult, but the silence after it. The silence he'd promised himself would never win again. One foggy morning, Marcus stood alone across the street from the building. Not the headquarters. This was different. Smaller. Older. The first office he ever interviewed in, back when he wore borrowed shoes and recited motivational quotes under his breath. He remembered the receptionist who smiled kindly. the hiring manager who said he was overqualified, and the rejection email that arrived 4 hours later. It had taken him years to understand. He wasn't overqualified. He was underestimated. Now, decades later, that building was empty. For lease. Marcus walked across the street, entered the dusty lobby, and took it all in. He didn't need more property or more power. He just needed closure. He signed the papers that afternoon, turned the space into a small mentorship hub for young professionals from backgrounds like his. No logos, no plaques, just quiet guidance in quiet rooms. One intern, walking out of a first session, asked him, "Why here?" Marcus smiled. "Because this is where the world said no. So now, it's where we say yes." The door closed gently behind them, and on the glass, a single phrase had been etched. "You are not invisible." Some people rise with noise. Marcus rose with silence. He didn't need to shout. He didn't need to win arguments in the room, because he'd already won by surviving long enough to be heard. His power wasn't just in owning the company that once dismissed him. It was in never forgetting what it felt like to be unseen, and choosing to see others anyway. He wasn't trying to change the world overnight. He was just trying to make sure no one walked through it invisible again. And sometimes, that's how revolutions begin, not with fireworks, but with someone holding the door open and saying, "I see you." So if this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Tell us in the comments who in your life helped you feel visible, and if no one ever did. Let this story be the start. You are seen, you are remembered, you matter.